If someone told you that a little girl who never walked a day in her life would take her first step in front of thousands, and it would all start with a single dad veteran with no money, no fame, and no connections, would you believe it? Before we dive in, if stories like this move you, if you believe in second chances, miracles, and the power of love, hit that like button and subscribe. Because this story, it will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. The sun was setting behind the towering skyline of Manhattan, but inside the penthouse office of Armitage Industries, the world was frozen in another kind of silence. On a luxurious velvet couch sat a little girl, Ava. She was 7. Her eyes were wide and curious, and her legs, thin and motionless, hung over the edge like porcelain. Across the room, the billionaire CEO, Jonathan Armitage, sharp suit, cold stare, powerful presence, stood with his arms crossed. Billionaire, yes. Genius, perhaps. But helpless in the one battle he couldn't win, helping his daughter walk. Doctors had given up. Therapists had tried and failed. The top hospitals in the world had charged millions for maybes and we'll sees. But Ava remained in her wheelchair, her diagnosis firm, spinal muscular atrophy, a rare form. They said she'd never walk. But the story doesn't start there. It starts across the river. In a tiny Brooklyn apartment with peeling paint and the smell of old coffee, a man named David Reyes laced up his old combat boots, same ones he'd worn in Afghanistan. Single dad. Mechanic. Quiet. Built like someone who had carried too much for too long. And at his feet, his son Mikey, 9 years old, was duct taping his broken sneakers again, smiling like they were brand new. David's life wasn't easy. He worked double shifts at a garage, trying to save enough for Mikey's asthma treatments. He carried war memories behind his eyes and loneliness in his shoulders. But he never let it reach Mikey. Because being a dad, his kind of dad, meant showing up, no matter what. That day, fate moved its first piece. Jonathan Armitage's assistant had posted an ad in a parenting forum, looking for a live-in mechanic and part-time caretaker for the estate. Someone discreet. Hands-on. Capable. They didn't expect a decorated veteran to show up with grease under his nails and pain buried in his silence. But Ava liked him instantly. David didn't say much. But he treated Ava like she wasn't broken. He never pitied her. He didn't flinch when she asked if she'd ever walk. He simply said, "Let's see what we can do." And what he did, no billionaire ever could. He built things. Little things, at first. A toy that helped her flex her fingers. A ramp with sensors that lit up when she reached a certain angle. Games that encouraged movement, disguised as fun. Every day, a little closer. Every day, hope growing like a seed cracked open. But Jonathan didn't trust hope. He saw it as dangerous. Weak. A setup for disappointment. He warned David, "Don't fill her head with dreams." David looked him in the eye and said quietly, "Maybe dreams are exactly what she needs." Weeks passed. Ava laughed more. She sat straighter. She began trying, really trying. Not for the therapists. Not even for her dad. For David. Because he believed when no one else did. Then came the fall. Ava tried to pivot from her chair to a standing frame David had modified. She slipped. Hard. Jonathan saw it. His fury exploded. "I told you this would happen. You're not a doctor. You're just some broken soldier trying to play hero." David said nothing. But his silence hit harder than any shout. That night, he packed his things. He was going to leave. Until Ava wheeled into his room. Tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Please don't go. I want to try again." David stayed. What followed were months of grit. Of tears. Of tiny wins. Ava holding herself up for 3 seconds. Then 5. Then taking a half step, supported. Jonathan watched from afar, torn between awe and terror, afraid to hope. And then, on a warm spring afternoon, everything changed. It was the company's anniversary gala. Dozens of cameras. Shareholders. Media. A stage. And in the front row, Ava, in a white dress, her wheelchair pushed by Mikey. David stood by the curtain backstage. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't on payroll anymore. But Ava had insisted. When the speeches ended, the crowd started to rise, until a hush fell. Ava had left her chair. Step by step, like the earth itself held its breath, she walked, wobbly, awkward, but walking, toward her father. Toward the men who never believed it could happen. Jonathan fell to his knees, catching her in his arms, sobbing into her hair. Not a billionaire now. Just a dad who finally saw his daughter stand. Reporters swarmed. The world watched. But David had already turned to leave, disappearing into the crowd like a ghost who had completed his mission. A week later, a video of Ava's first steps went viral. But what stunned people most wasn't the girl walking, it was the story behind her. The veteran. The single dad. The man who had no degrees, no riches, no fame, but did the impossible. Jonathan found him again. Not to hire him, but to thank him. He offered him anything, money, houses, whatever. David smiled and said, "I already got what I came for." And he looked over at Mikey, now breathing easier, smiling wider, his shoes finally brand new. Sometimes, the most broken people become the greatest healers. And sometimes, miracles don't need wings. Just grit, love, and someone who believes when everyone else